Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yes. Good stuff. Thank you for being here this evening for our Education Reform Town Hall meeting. What we're going to do this evening is have a presentation by our panelists. We're going to pause halfway through. We're going to open the floor up for questions. We're going to resume the presentation and then have some more questions at the end. For our audience listening at home, please feel free to send in your questions. We want to thank you for tuning in this evening, and again, thank you to our audience that are here in person. We do want to remind you to practice COVID protocols, so if you are going to be walking around, please make sure you practice safety. Okay, so let's get started. So this evening we have a wide range of guests here this evening. We have the Minister of Ed range of guests here this evening. We have the Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rabain JP MP, Education Reform in the Public School System will be his focus on today. The Commissioner of Education, her focus will be the future structure of the public school system for primary and senior schools. We have the Director of Academics, Department of Education, Dr. Llewellyn Simmons, and he will be presenting on the public school system's vision for learning, and then we will have question and answers. Then we go on to the Chair of Education Reform Governance Team and member of the Learning First Team, Ms. Lisa Smith, who will be talking about reorienting the system. And last but not least, we have Ms. Learning First, who is the member of the Education Reform Learning First Team, and she will be giving us a presentation on a deep dive into learning programs. Without delay, I'd like to start the evening off by welcoming our panelists. Again, welcome to our guests and our viewers at home, and we'll start off with the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Selassie, and welcome everybody to our presentation, our town hall meeting on education reform. Tonight we'll be here discussing all things that have to do with education reform. Reform in our public school system is underway. It is helping our children to follow their passions and interests, build on their talents and capabilities, and achieve the career and further education. We will do this by creating schools and a school system where each and every child has great learning outcomes and life opportunities for them, for our economy, and for the future of our nation. Why do we need reform in our schools? The world is changing, and so education needs to change. Jobs, the economy, and life, more generally, are rapidly changing, fueled by new technologies and social media, and accelerated by the impacts of the COVID pandemic. Environmental and resource pressures are intensifying, and there are still deep historical divisions within our society. Our education system needs to change to help our young people develop the skills, knowledge, values, and relationships to enable them to access and be the creators of the jobs of the future, to be active citizens, and to tackle increasingly complex challenges. I often get asked, what makes this round of reform anything different from what we've done previously? Not only are we being more ambitious than ever before, something that would generally make our system world-class. The way we are approaching it is different. It is intentional, it is supported, and it really importantly learns from the past. The 4 features of successful transformations stops work from slipping at the bottom of the in-tray. Vision avoids haphazard and uncoordinated efforts. Action plans avoids false starts. And capacity and capability mitigates anxiety and frustration. The lenses from where we can view Bermuda's reform agenda can be seen on this slide here. For our children to receive the highest possible learning outcomes and best possible, we have to, 1, redesign the system, the pink circle. Rethink how schools and systems are governed, and we view that in the blue circle. Transform our schools, and we view that in the green circle. And when we intersect the improving outcomes for our children and young people. For the new models of teaching, learning, and schooling to be supported and sustained, the systems, policies, and procedures that surround our schools need to be redesigned. That is, if our children are to achieve their career and further education aspirations, they are to be able to follow their passions and interests and build on their talents and capabilities. If they are to fly, the system needs a change of mindset. Just as we want our educators and nurture our children, so we want our system to empower and nurture our educators, our principals, and our schools. We need a system and governance structures that move from being top-down and directive to one that cradles and enables, that puts children first and at the center of everything that we do.
Thank you, Minister. I will continue. To support and enable these developments, we will be moving from a 3-tier system, primary, middle, and senior, to a 2-tier system, parish primary schools and senior signature schools. This will reduce the number of transitions for our students, but it will also make for better use of our teachers' expertise and our financial resources. And we will build the physical environments for 21st century learning. Legislation was passed in March 2021, which has paved the way for the implementation of the signature school concept, which will start in September of 2022 for the Cedar Bridge Academy and the Barclay Institute. When the work is complete, we will have a system of 10 parish primary schools that go from primary 1 to primary 8 and 5 signature-based schools that will go from S1 to S5. In addition to the 5 signature schools, we will have 2 special signature schools, one for alternative learning and one for students with exceptionalities. And both of these signature schools will be for students of all ages. Although our focus tonight is not on the parish primary schools, I believe it's important to just share some brief information about the features for the parish primary schools. They will be the learning hub of each parish. They will mobilize the strengths and the assets of communities in support of our schools. The parish primary school concept has emerged from research into innovative, impactful primary school and early childhood learning environments from around the world. And there was a focus on determining what they had in common. The teams who worked on these features explored over 50 examples of learning environments and then drilled down to about 15 very powerful examples that drew upon the principles of learning that steer our education reform efforts. The 10 features for our parish primary schools will ensure that learning is a priority, that schools are the hub of their community, that the focus is on student interests, passions, and ambitions, and that the learning environment is flexible and takes place in flexible learning spaces. Our students will develop 21st century skills. Our teachers will not only collaborate within schools, but across schools. And families will play a key and critical role as partners. Our students will be culturally and globally connected, and they will ensure, or we will ensure, that history and legacy are preserved. It is important to spend just a bit of time talking about how the signature learning program will work. Each signature senior school will have the core curriculum: English, math, science, and social studies. And each of the senior signatures will offer 2 signatures. The signatures will take up to 30% of a student's curriculum, with 20% spent on a major and 10% on a minor. The students who will be entering our senior signature schools in September of this year had an opportunity, along with their parents, to participate in what we called a taster program, an opportunity to gain some insights about the signature learning programs at our senior schools. Over time, those taster programs will actually be pushed down to the primary level so that students can begin to think about and become exposed to what they can experience at those senior signature schools. Over time, the signature programs will be delivered both face-to-face and online, and this will enable our students to do a major at one school and a minor at another. So our signature learning programs will help every student to follow their passions. It will build on their talents, and it will help them to achieve their career and further education aspirations. The signature learning programs have been based on a world-class curriculum. Students will experience authentic, real-world learning experiences, meaningful projects. The assessments that are given to our students will demonstrate what they can do and what they know well. The graduation requirements will equip our children to transition into colleges and universities. And we will have system policies and procedures and frameworks that will support and sustain 21st century learning. All of the work that has been done has been carried out based on research for best practices around the world, and it has been supported by our change partner, Innovation Unit. Additionally, it's important to share with you that the necessary professional learning and development for all of our teachers to become highly skilled educators is also being put into place. How did our signature schools come about, or how did we select the signature learning programs? There were some global scans that took place. There were some local trans scans that took place. And that information was brought together in a report that is called The Future World of Work for Bermuda. Our team members had an opportunity to research the impact of the pandemic by conducting local interviews. And additionally, they had an opportunity to speak with students, parents, persons from our business industries as well. It's important to note that the learning programs are based on current research. And additionally, there was an initial idea to have a signature school for entrepreneurship. However, based on the feedback from our community and our stakeholders, it was determined that entrepreneurship should go across and be featured in all of our signature schools. In September, the first 4 signature learning programs will open at our senior schools. At Cedar Bridge Academy, we will have STEM and the trades professions, and at the Barclay Institute, financial and insurance services and health and social care. I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Simmons. He's going to share about our very powerful vision for learning.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good evening, everyone. When you talk about the Bermudian school system's vision for learning, the vision you want to have is young people in the classroom who are adapted to their learning environment, who are engaged with their learning environment, and they're strong emotional intelligence. In addition, we want them to be empowered, culturally connected to their learning. You heard the Commissioner speak to entrepreneurship. That is very much a part of the vision of learning that we have for our children. With it, there must be also innovative and adaptive learning that is also flexible. An important feature of this vision for learning is that it's culturally relevant. And as it is culturally relevant, we want to future focus that is inspiring for our children as it is collaborative. Most important, that distinguishes this 21st century learning model for our children is that it's a personalized learning model designed to include students or be inclusive with all of our Bermuda children as we talk about engaging in a flexible learning environment. When we talk about the redesigning models of learning and teaching and schooling, we want to keep in mind also that it's also about the educators, the teachers before them. As we are talking about a personalized learning environment, this is a change mindset for many of our educators, for many of our teachers. So teachers and educators must come with a change mindset to this approach to teaching and learning. They must engage in shared planning, peer observation. The professional learning models are very collaborative. Critical thinking is very much a part of it, and it includes collaboration across schools as well as within schools. And that's very significant for our Bermuda schooling system, across schools and within schools. So schools are also co-partners in the personalized learning and the vision of learning that we have for all of our children. It also has a multi-tiered approach. And let me take some time with this here. When we talk about tier 1, we're talking about building the capacity of everyone across the system in the unique features of learning, teaching, and schooling. Tier 2, you'll have some smaller cohorts, interventions focused on school and system transformation throughout our school transformation teams. Tier 3 has more of a focused support for smaller groups, again, such as the teachers delivering the signature learning programs that you heard the commissioner speak to just now. There's been a lot of emphasis on a lot of questions about what are some of the school transformation teams. Well, it's been a composition of a very diverse group of people in education as well as community. And as the depiction outlines there, it's been across Bermuda. Everyone, every ethnic group, every racial group, every socioeconomic group has been a part of this transformational process. And so we want to assure that the listening audience as well as the greater public become active participants in this here, who are also a part of the transformation, not just those who are part of this team. And we want to keep it very much a diverse, shared experience of people's expertise and experience working on behalf of all of our children in the Bermuda education system. It's been a journey that began in April, June, where we began a lot of preparation. And June to September, there's been a lot of design and development. I know teams have been busy all this week and all last week. October to January, there's been lots of development. And so from February to June, we're pretty much now into an implementation phase. We're confident in the development and the process that we are currently engaged in. If there's an essential question that the public and everyone must answer is, what is the right design for the future of Bermudian schools? And I think everyone needs to reflect on that essential question. What is the right design for the future Bermudian school? We believe that we are embarking on the right design for Bermudian students and for Bermuda schools as we talk about it being collaborative, being innovative, transformative, and inclusive again of all of Bermuda's people.
Thank you, Minister, Commissioner, and Dr. Simmons. We will pause for a moment. We said at the very beginning that we have quite a bit to cover in this town hall meeting this evening, and we want to let this be an opportunity for those of you here to ask questions that was just presented. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question for what we've covered thus far? I do want to ask that you keep your questions to 2 minutes so that we can make sure we can cover as many questions as possible. Were there any questions from the audience? Yes.
Question. So this is for the whole panel. You guys mentioned that, of course, there's a big change in the curriculum. I just want to know what has been done so far to prepare the students going in for September coming in this new school year. What has been done to kind of prepare them for the new curriculum that they will be learning? So this comes for the people who are, going from S1 to S2, or even just the people who are entering the senior school system for the first time.
Who would like to start? Commissioner, you want to start that off?
You've done it.
I can start, and then I'd like either of our team members from Learning First to give more specifics. But I can say that we have had a number of teams working on various work streams, and there have been individuals focusing on curriculum, and so we have representatives from Learning First who can drill down and give you a bit more information.
Thank you for that question. I think the most important thing to think about is the fact, if you go back to the slide where the commissioner presented, the signature learning program is a portion of a student's day. So there's the core curriculum that they would have had, and that vertical articulation from M3 to S1 for their core subjects. Those are things, that's what we call business as usual. And so when they enter in September 2022 to think about the signature learning programs that they're going to be engaged in, they've had something called a taster, and I don't want to open the door too much because I think Ms. Burns is going to get into that, but the taster program is about exposing them to the signature learning program, not necessarily the learning experiences that they're going to have in front of them. But if you think about any business sector, any signature learning program, it has to be supported by solid curriculum, whether it be math, science, social studies, language, arts. And so the preparation is part of the structure as we see it now, but the newness and the excitement is about what they're going to have in September. And I think Laurel can go a little bit deeper in terms of some of the specificity, but there is a distinct intentionality around the articulation from M3 to S1 that exists right now, but then how are we growing that and developing it for new learning experiences? Yeah,
I think that's basic. Yeah,
that's
in a nutshell.
Just for clarification, I heard you say S2 or and above. The new curriculum starts at S1, and so the S2s through S4 will continue with what is currently in place. And as the S1s matriculate through our senior schools, the curriculum will follow them.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions from the audience? If not, I have a question that has come in from our online viewers, and I want to say thank you to our viewers at home that are tuning in. We have a point that says, I'm interested in getting in-depth information on the automotive track at the senior level. That's one. And will students be provided with an advisor that will actively assist in ensuring they are on track, especially if they're doing dual enrollments between schools? So those two questions have come in from online. Thank you, viewers, for those questions.
Thank you, Dr. Selassie. I think I can take that one. So the automotive track would certainly be taking place at Cedar Bridge Academy. And so I think basically contacting the school or to find out more information about what that track could look like would probably work best. But the second part of your question, remind me.
It's, will students have an advisor that will be actively assisting them, especially when they're looking at the dual enrollment program?
Okay. So I think one of the things about the work that we're doing is that we are not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? And so currently we do have advisory programs, we do have the counseling programs that includes career advising, etc., and preparing them for college. But what we are doing is looking at best practice across the world. So some of the exciting things that we've been doing within Learning First and in the redesign is looking at our advisory programs and how we support our young people, even from a social emotional perspective. So I understand that the question is grounded in around dual enrollment, but it's bigger than that, right? And so how are we providing advisory and counseling and support to our young people to make choices, whether it's dual enrollment, whether it's more internships, in terms of the partnerships that we're creating. And so we are revamping our advisory program in a really comprehensive way to provide that level of support, and looking at how the counselors can provide even more enhanced services for our young people, and provide really strong wraparound. We're looking at personal learner advocates. So these are some things we are doing to support young people, whether it's dual enrollment, whether it's internships or other pathways for our young people as they move into their career paths or passions or interests.
Thank you, Laurel. We have another question that asks, what is the philosophy behind Learning First? And on that note, I do want to let you start your presentation, because you are going to go into the deep dive on signature learning and Learning First. So I think this is an appropriate time to just let you start your portion of the presentation.
Good. So the philosophy around Learning First is really about co-designing what it is we want for our young people here in Bermuda. And so very different in terms of my history, in terms of being an educator in the Bermuda public school system, where oftentimes we really have had the best of the best from around the world, literally in terms of programming. But a lot of that was about, this is the research and this is how you do it. Now go ahead and go and do it. What we're doing here is something that's very different. We've scanned literally the globe in various aspects of education. And as colleagues and community members and stakeholders and parents and school leaders, we've come together and we've had conversations around what are these best things that we've seen around the globe, and what do we think is really viable and feasible for our community, and what tweaks do we need to make in order to make it ours. And so this whole co-design process that we've engaged in is really what's making this work that we're doing really strong and really exciting. And I don't know of anyone who's been a part of the process, whether they've been a part of the process as a person who's provided feedback in a prototyping session, or someone, as we call them now, long haulers, who've been with us literally over the past 2 years and provided feedback and information and done the designing with us. There hasn't been anyone who hasn't said, this is really exciting and it feels right for us. So I think that really does ground in terms of the philosophy of Learning First and the work that we do. So I will get into my portion of the presentation. I do want us to take a deeper dive into 2 of the signature learning programs to get a sense of the work that has been done and how we've kind of formatted what signature learning is going to look like. So as stated earlier, the signature learning pathways at the Barclay Institute will be financial and insurance services, and then we have health and social care. So within financial and insurance services, we determined that if we created tracks around accountancy and banking and financial services and business administration and management, fintech and insurance, we will provide young people with some really strong paths of exploration and experience to find specific careers they want to delve into in the near future. Similarly, with health and social care, we did create 3 tracks there: medical sciences and services, social sciences and services, and holistic and allied health care services. And again, we believe those 3 tracks create a whole world of options for our young people. So as an example, when we look at financial and insurance services, what we do have in the first instance, we want to think about what is the learner profile or characteristics or strengths of a young person who may want to go down that path. And so we determined that we want them to be analytical, have some problem-solving skills or interests. There is some intellectual curiosity, of course some mathematics in there, and technology, computer skills, communication skills, and of course in the 21st century, we want people to be able to work collaboratively and work independently. So when we look at the signature learning pathway strands and the career pathways within the financial and insurance services, again, we did determine those 5 strands. And we expect that young people will follow one of those strands for 20% of their time, and then take on a minor for about 10% of their time over the 4 years that they do financial and insurance services. Since currently we have health and social care at the Barclay Institute, they may opt at this time to choose their minor somewhere in health and social care, which would be really interesting. So as an example, they may do business administration and management, but if they have an interest in the allied healthcare sector, they may do a minor in that because that's something that they also have an interest in. And so here we have listed on the right-hand side more specificity around the strands, and this gives us an idea of some of the careers that they might do if they explore a particular track. Again, for instance, if we have fintech, they know that some of the careers in the fintech industry could be around cybersecurity or blockchain development or artificial intelligence or be an app developer or a data science specialist. So let's have a look at what we're offering at Cedar Bridge Academy. We are offering STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And then we have the trades and professions. For STEM, we have the creative technologies. We are allowing young people to explore animal and veterinary sciences and environmental sciences, computer science, and of course engineering. And then for the trades and professions, that one is quite wide as well. We have automotive technology and electrical. We do have textile and designs, carpentry, cosmetology, horticulture, and for now, culinary arts and hospitality. I do say that for now because as we saw in some previous slides, the next set of signature learning programs that we will be developing will include hospitality and tourism as well as education services. But for now, if a young person has that interest, we're going to get them going through the trades and professions. So again, as an example, for the trades and professions, we're looking at a learner profile where there's creative thinking, where someone's highly practical, there's the problem solving again, maybe some research and presentation skills, of course mathematics, maybe some design technology, strong communication skills, employability skills, enterprise skills, and again, working collaboratively and independently. So similar to what I shared in the previous slides, they'll do that 20% for their major, 10% for their minor, and we have the various potential careers. I think when you look at textiles and designs, that can range anywhere from being a tailor, upholsterer, or embroiderer to a merchandiser or an interior designer or even an event planner or a stylist. So there are lots of opportunities that we do expose our young people to, and we let them know that this is not an exhaustive list, but it gets them going and thinking about the direction they may want to go in.
Thank you. So let's take a look at this particular slide because it does stimulate a lot of conversation, and actually the word that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is the sustain or the sustainability of this heavy lift. And so when we think about how do we sustain change, how do we sustain the capacity of our teachers to be able to keep the journey moving, we start to work up this little statement about empowering and nurturing, right? And they all go together. They're not separate. They are part and parcel. And so when we think about empowering our educators, providing empowerment for our students, our principals, our central office teams, and anyone else who has a touch point that touches education, what does that look like? And more importantly, what does it feel like? Because if not, these are words on a paper, but how do we translate that vision into practical application? And if you think about Fortune 500 companies or jurisdictions who do transformation very well, they understand that it's a dangerous practice to empower just a few or one, right? The empowerment and the motivation and the momentum is when we bring along a critical mass of individuals to do the heavy lifting, to own the work. So you've heard terms like co-creating and co-designing. So this is actually how we start to think about looking at the DNA of our system differently. And there's a culture that we've had to compete with historically, where we often define the system against the school and district office, and then in the school it's the principal and the teacher, and then the teacher usually separates. We are a small community. The system has to embrace everybody. We all have to own this journey. It cannot be separated. And until we sort of change that, understanding that the system is not you and me, but us and we may miss the mark. And so this is one of those pieces that we have to hold tight onto and to continue to empower, to nurture. And relationships do not mean, I'm going to say it, relationships do not mean taking down the standard of expectations around accountability. You can hold hard relationships and still grow and cultivate change and excellence. It's the balance that we have to figure out, and I think we're all up to the challenge. The next slide that we sort of supports this is this what we call the cradling. And if any of us have seen an organizational chart, typically you don't even see the children on the chart, right? You see the commissioner, you see the office of the minister, register, you see all these different positions and people. But what this graphic is meant to sort of demonstrate in a very interesting way is the cradling, is how do we support? Because we all say that children are the most important. That's why we come to work every day. So if they're the most important, let's get them in the center, and then let's surround them with all of the best practices that we know are effective for transformation and sustaining change. So let's look at the colors, because they all mean something. So I talked earlier about, not the us and me, but it's about the system. No matter where you are in that organization, you have a responsibility collectively to support and to ensure there's the best possible experiences for our young people, our educators who are on the dance floor doing the work. So there's the cradling of the arms and all those yellow pieces. Those are those policies and procedures that we at the central office, we need to take a look at. Because what happens sometimes when there's not alignment with change around policy and procedures, it can go or, sort of go to the wayside. So how do we start to look at all of those pieces around the yellow and the cradle, whether it be comms and engagement, teaching and learning, your curriculum, how are we supporting schools and then by default young people to actually begin to make that shift and have the whole system together moving all in the same direction and not in tension with one another. The blue pieces, they sit in the schools, scheduling, advisory, assessment, the learning experiences, and all of those bits and pieces. Interesting enough, the pink pieces on the surrounding the students, those are the outcomes that we want. We want our young people to be entrepreneurs, as I think Laura was talking about. That's the idea. We want them to be resilient. We want them to be having those understandings of what it means to be part of this Bermuda culture and what does that mean to be a good citizen. So all of those outcomes sort of surround this young person in the pink. And the green on the bottom, that's what I like to consider our North Star. That keeps us honest in this conversation. Those are those guiding design principles that Learning First uses, and we use them to make sure that any decision we make along the way, we're empowering and we're keeping true to the vision as it relates to, is it flexible, is it adaptable? And all of those icons actually mean something, and I'm hoping the more that you get involved in the work, you can understand what those icons mean. So this is the cradle, this is the support system, this is the change in the DNA of how we've traditionally done school and embracing it from a collective responsibility, community, school, parents, the entire gamut. The next slide, very interesting, talks about the partnerships. And for the past week, I think it was this week, Monday, it was so exciting to open the newspaper and see that the workforce development they were overwhelmed by the business partnerships, right, to support young people over the summer. Now the challenge we have is how do we move that to just the summer to now a part of how we do school year round, and those companies still being just excited for other opportunities. And so let's look at some of the models of partnerships that we're considering. And this is a work stream, one of those work streams that you would have seen in the, what color was it? I'm losing my colors. I think it was the yellow around, right? That's the piece, because if we want to do signature learning programs differently and have our students have a different experience, our green at the bottom says that learning can take place any place and anywhere. The four walls of the classroom is no longer the status quo. So that means they need to be in our communities, they need to be in our businesses, and they're going to get those internships. There's a new buzzword about externships now. Where teachers who may not have been in the business sector for some while based on their degree, they get to shadow somebody to understand what does that look like now for the young people that I'm in front of. And now I have to be able to make sure that they're equipped with the skills of today, not when I got my certifications back then. So there's so much excitement around partnerships, because that is sort of like one of the best pieces that our young people are going to have the opportunity come as one. And there's a partnership that has been identified for every single signature track. That is exciting, that is powerful, that shows the commitment of the Bermuda public, the Bermuda citizens, to take this whole collective responsibility seriously. The work stream that's actually working on this about 3 or 4 weeks ago, they sent up an MOU to the chambers to review the memorandum of understanding to look at what does that relationship look like. And the idea is not to make it so cumbersome for our partners that there's all this paperwork that they have to fill out, and then, that could turn people off. So they're really trying to streamline the process and have them part of this experience. And it's exciting to see in the paper around workforce development and the horticultural team that's here from England working with young people. So you open up the paper and you see this live and in action. Closely connected to this, you'll see the mentoring, all of those bits and pieces in terms of, and the color codes are in there, what happens inside, what happens outside, and how do we get people into our classrooms? I mean, educators get excited, you can talk for hours, but it's nothing more powerful to get that person from industry or the sector that you're actually in front of and hear their experiences as they talk to young people and do modules and courses. So that's the power behind all of this collective. Once again, it's going to take all hands on deck to make this successful and the payoff in the future. Before we move on to that slide, I do want to, there's one down there on the corner here that talks about refurbishing and building and construction, which is a nice segue to the next slide. Thank you. So PMO, how does this all come together? The minister said that this is an overview of the entire picture of education reform. So we have to think about the decision report that was tabled in July 2021. And it talked about the identification of the 10 parish primary schools. And there were some commitments made during the consultation around how do we have our infrastructures and our facilities respond to the types of way that we're doing schools. So right now there is a PMO, sort of an RFP, working with KPMG, working with a company called Stantec, and I'm going to walk you through the timelines and the work that has been accomplished. The PMO actually has not been stood up yet, only because it is the work of the RFP, but I'm going to walk you through the timelines when this slide comes up. So the very first phase of the we talked about consultation from December 20 to April 2021, where there are lots and lots of meetings via Zoom talking about and listening, a lot of listening to our community members around this concept of parish primary schools. In August, and in between that time, we talked about the decision report being tabled. After there was the feedback, the minister had time to look at all of the feedback documentation to make a decision on consultation to sort of upload those guiding principles that are required by law. And then in August, the internal team, in addition with Public Works and members from the Project and Procurement Office, started to sit down with the permanent secretary, our facilities manager within the Department of Education, and look at RFP that could go out to tender for proponents to respond to look at an infrastructural renewal plan, to look at all of our facilities and determine how do we now begin to bridge the gap. Went out, there was something that came back around July and August. There was a robust interview for scoring of said RFPs, and then there was a decision taken. I mentioned KPMG, who's looking at the financial pieces. They're looking at how do we finance such a project? Is it the 3P concept? Is it, is it something similar to the hospital around donations and, all of those sort of innovative ways of thinking? And then you have Stantec, who is an architectural firm who's looking at the design of our buildings. They understand the vision for learning. They understand the guardrails of what that looks like in terms of the bigger picture. But certainly there will come a time when the work of learning first of what we always call about what's happening inside of the building begins to take shape on what those buildings look like. And so now we're in the phases where Stantec and KPMG, they're working, they've been on site. They actually visited all 10 campuses, and I'm actually impressed with the level of detail that they know about our schools. And so now they're preparing a gap analysis, right? Here's the vision, here's the desired state, here's what we have, and what's the gap in between. And so from there, we will then be able to provide a report to the Office of the Ministry that speaks to the recommendations of developing a PMO to manage the rollout over a phased period of time.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Laurel. I do apologize. My screen went blank for a second there. As you can see, there's been quite a lot of work that has gone into this, and now we want to talk about some of the enabling structures that are currently being put in place to support all of this work. As Laurel had indicated, we're now in month 28, I believe it is. And so when we say that we've done a lot of work to move this forward, it's actually been a lot of work. And sometimes the questions we get asked is, is this sustainable? Will you keep it up? And one of the things that we do know that we often get accused of, or education often get accused of, is stop starting. This is something we're committed to. This is something that we are putting forward to get the best possible outcomes for our students. Now I want to talk about two entities that, two additional things that don't get a lot of publicity, and that is the development of the Historical Legacy Committee and the Education Authority. We must know and understand the many interwoven threads that have shaped and characterized us as a people. So to foster a national identity and a sense of belonging, we must go into the recording for posterity and evolution and the development of education in Bermuda. The ultimate aim or reason is for the History and Legacy Committee is to explore, record, determine ways in which education in Bermuda can be captured, documented, honored, commemorated, preserved for current and future generations, and to help foster pride in who we are as Bermudians. Similar to the previous slide where we talked about how the PMO came about, the History and Legacy Committee also has its timeline. In December 2021, it was announced the development of the Historical and Legacy Working Group. And the purpose of this working group was to develop terms of reference for the History and Legacy Committee, develop the types of professional and community roles and skill sets necessary for this committee, identify potential work streams supporting organizational structures and processes for the committee, i.e. research, data collection, community engagement, and development. Develop a provisional plan outlined with milestones and make recommendations on the likely duration of the short to medium term phases of the History and Legacy Committee project, and to also make recommendations of the likely time contributions of the History and Legacy Committee members. In March 2022, the report was delivered to me and the recommendations are being considered. It is anticipated that in September 2022, the next phase of the History and Legacy Committee will be implemented to carry this project further. At this time, I would like to thank the members who worked diligently on the working group. That is Heather Whalen, Chairperson, Ms. Alberta Dyer-Tucker, Mr. Adrian Lodge, Ms. Tanisha Otley, Dr. Theodore Francis, Mr. Randy Scott, Dr. Keto Swan, and Ms. Rhonda Woods Smith. We want to also talk about how we reconceptualize how the system of schools is governed. And you often hear this buzzword about the Education Authority. And there's a rationale behind the Education Authority. It's a key element of any successful education reform is establishing a system of governance arrangements that are fit for purpose and fit for the future. You may recall when Plan 2022 recognized this by calling for a review of the current arrangements, and Bermuda First called for the introduction of an education authority in the 2019 Future State Report. There needs to be good governance to sustain and support reform. Governance is not subject to day-to-day political pressures. Governance that has the independence to be flexible and agile in ensuring the needs of Bermuda's children, economy, community that are best served and efficiently run. We all acknowledge that the relationships between our schools, our school boards, with the ministry and the Department of Education are not and have not been as free-flowing as we would like. The establishment of an education authority will be an opportunity to reset, renew, and clarify these relationships. We need to learn from the past to create a better future. We need to move away from our current and seemingly subconscious philosophy of a system of schools to a collaborative school system. You would have heard earlier Dr. Simmons mentioned about the interconnection between our schools that's needed, or the interdependency of our schools in order to help each other to grow. We need a system that supports each and every young person to be the best they can be and follow their passions and interests, build on their talents and capabilities, and achieve their aspirations. A system which is equitable, a system which all schools, while having their own ethos and culture, achieve excellence. A system whose governance reflects the philosophy and approach of the pedagogy of the system as a whole. Governance which is based on and learns from the governance of successful 21st century learning systems. Governance arrangements that hold schools to account but are supportive and enabling, not directive and controlling. The work to create the Education Authority continues towards education reform as school transformation is underway. The Education Authority, operating at arm's length from the Bermuda government, will be responsible for enabling and supporting all schools to achieve the best possible outcomes for our students. We will move away from a system of schools to a school system, foster collaboration between schools in the interests of students and ensuring consistency and equity for all. Through school boards operating under the remit of the authority, school communities will enjoy a greater level of autonomy and with input from the community, educators, parents, and students. Currently, the Education Authority Working Group is creating the framework for what the Education Authority would look like. They're currently receiving feedback from the Department of Education, school boards, and other stakeholders to formulate the plan moving forward. The working group will continue to meet and collect data and help formalize the proposals as we move forward. I'm anticipating with the Education Authority that we'll be making some major announcements in the not too distant future on where we are and where we intend to take the Education Authority as we move forward. And with that, I now want to pass to the Commissioner, who will bring us home, and we will take questions from the audience and from the listening audience.
Thank you, Minister. We want to talk about what now and what is next. In September of 2023, 2 parish primary schools will begin at Francis Patton and Purvis Primary, and an additional signature senior school offering hospitality, tourism, and educational services. They are all slated to open. It will take several years for us to have established and developed our 10 parish primary schools and to put in place all of the signature learning programs, including the signature schools for exceptionalities and for alternative education, and to realize the vision for learning. But we will proceed in a very measured and intentional way. And what we have committed to do is to learn as we go. So we have presented some information on our signature schools this evening, which represents thousands of hours of hard work by our dedicated educators and members of our community and our stakeholders. We certainly could not have achieved what we have achieved to date without the work and support of our community. Individuals who have trusted the plans that have been put in place. And so we are very thankful for their contributions. We are in the process right now of onboarding the newest set of individuals to help co-design our signature school for hospitality, tourism, and educational services, as well as for the parish primary schools. We encourage all of you at the Learning First website and to receive updates. So we will continue to move forward with our education reform plans. We will continue to create opportunities for collaboration with our stakeholders, to give them an opportunity to contribute and to help chart the way forward. We are committed to a transparent process. We are committed to a process of co-designing. We're very confident that the direction in which we are heading will provide a first-class education system for our young people, and that it will enable them to fulfill their fullest potential and achieve their future aspirations. We welcome all of you to join the journey and to help shape the future of education. This ends our presentation, and so we will now officially open up the floor for any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Richards, Dr. Simmons, Minister Murdane, Ms. Burns, and Ms. Smith for that wonderful presentation. We do have time right now to open the floor to questions. I do want to remind you that we have actually a number of questions that have come in from our viewers that are watching at home, but we're going to give the first preference to the people here in the audience, and we'd like to remind you to keep your questions to 2 minutes and make sure that we can focus specifically on the issues that are presented today about our education reform. Question?
Good evening, all. I'd like to start by saying that I'm fully supportive of what you guys are doing, and I believe that the Signature School program, hand in hand with the youth employment strategy, should take our youth very far. A short testimonial myself, I came through in the trades, and I was only able to make it, I believe, because I was passionate about it. And currently I'm working down at the government quarry as a body man. And we have an apprentice down there and a summer student, and they're also very interested in their trades, and they'd like to take it to the next level. But they're a little bit beside themselves because we've just come through this pandemic, and obviously funding is hard to secure. But I said, don't worry, government's on board with this. Everything I've seen, they're willing to take students to the next level. So my question for you is, as far as the higher education, will you guys be doing any sort of partnership with the Bermuda College in order to take students, once they've graduated from high school, to the next level? And I know you probably can't answer this question, but will the college be opening up more programs so that students can get their higher education locally rather than overseas? Because when I done the automotive body trade, I had to fly overseas to finish my education, but I feel that's something that we can offer here locally.
Thank you for your question.
I guess I'm probably better suited to answer that question than anyone else. The Bermuda College is, collaboratively, the Bermuda College has always worked with the Department of Education. Since coming to be the minister, there are 2 programs that have been put in place that help our high school graduates specifically with Bermuda College. One of them is the College Promise Program. Any student that graduates from the Barclay Institute and Cedar Bridge Academy with a GPA of 3.0 or higher is able to attend the Bermuda College tuition free to obtain their degree. We've also furnished the Bermuda College with a grant of $300,000 per year specifically for financial assistance, and that is utilized for just like everyone else. We've seen a tremendous growth at the Bermuda College with the amount of students that enter into the system. And that grant has also been used for what we call the PACE department, which is the learning department that people utilize for as part-time if they're not as students. So there will be courses, specific courses that you can take with the Bermuda College to enhance your skill sets. Additionally, Bermuda College has continued to grow their articulation agreement. Now, that's agreements that they have with external universities and colleges to enable you to do your full degree locally here in Bermuda. In the last graduation ceremony, we had 9 graduates that graduated with their bachelor's degree and/or master's degree from the Bermuda College without ever leaving Bermuda. 6 of them were through Mount St. Vincent University, and 3 of them were through the University of Miami, I'm going to say it was. University of Miami, their master's degrees. In terms of what you're talking about specifically with the technical school, that is something I would be glad to collect your information afterwards, and we can have a conversation, and I can introduce you to the persons over there to see what it is that is happening at the Bermuda College that can possibly go towards what you're doing. We have a dual enrollment program with our high schools, the applied technology program that does exactly that. We have 2 dual enrollment programs there, one the academic track and one the applied technology track that introduces our children to the technology side of it, and so they will get an opportunity to see plumbing, automotive technology, welding, computer technology, and things of that like right here at the Bermuda College. Again, to help fund that, the ministry has created 5 scholarships for students who go into that applied science technology track with the Bermuda College, because once they finish it, even though it's dual enrollment, they'll need 1 more year to get their degree. And so if they want to continue on, we actually do have funding to assist them as well.
Okay. I just wanted to add that if the opportunity was to arise, I'm also interested in teaching myself. So if I can go to that next level and become a teacher, I would.
Well, we can definitely talk.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did want to add to that as well. So I think you'd be really happy to know that in terms of the work that we're doing with Signature Learning Program, we are looking at strengthening partnerships in various ways, and even credentialing in various ways. So what's really exciting is that over time, establishing more and more opportunities that even before they graduate high school, that they have had opportunities for credentialing, so that by the time they graduate, they're already certified in certain things. And we started to look at how that can happen, along with getting that on-the-job experience before they finish high school, and keeping in mind that ultimately, as we know that we've already established that this is going to take some time, but the ultimate goal is for when we go back to a two-tier system and have primary 1 to 8, and we have 5 years of senior school, that's certainly what we're now doing in 4 years. But we have to also build on and say, well, what can we then accomplish in 5 years once we transition to the two-tier system? And that will be young people having certifications if they're in something like the trades and professions before they even graduate as well. So I think that's a really awesome opportunity as well.
And to piggyback, Bermuda College has been absolutely fabulous. Dean Roberts, Dr. Curtis Tweed, looking at some of these curriculum frameworks, making sure there's no duplication of efforts, and looking at what that vertical articulation actually looks like from high school with some of the signature learning programs, and when they get to Bermuda College, if they're looking at someone. So there's definitely been that cross-pollination of sharing the documents to make sure that, we're not duplicating, or we're strengthening and building a solid foundation to move. So it's been a very exciting work to listen to the teams get excited about the work. And we have a team member here, Mrs. Hayward.
Thank you for that question. I want to direct this question to Ms. Burns. Some of the information that you gave sort of listed, tracks the various courses that students can take. A question that came in online was, will the arts be considered as its own school or part of the curriculum?
Thank you for that. So in one of the previous slides, when we looked at the current listing of the signature learning programs, the arts ultimately will be a signature learning program. We're not there yet. And just to take us back a bit, during the original consultation, there was a conversation around having a STEAM signature learning program: science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. And through the consultation process, there was a lot of feedback that had us pull out the arts and leave it at STEM, but more importantly, have culture and the arts as a signature learning program. So that is on tap at some point to do that. But in the meantime, as we stated earlier, that while we're doing signature learning programs and we're launching the first set in September, there's some things that still are not going away and that will still be maintained in our schools. And outside of the core curriculum, we also have our electives, and the electives are not going away, even for young people who are doing signature learning programs. So the arts still exists. We do have visual arts or dance or music or drama. That will still exist from an electives perspective for young people to participate in.
And I'm going to ask you one more question as far as far and away. Where else in the world are similar signature programs being used, and how long have they been? Like, how have you used that research to make the decisions for Bermuda?
We have, I literally don't have it in front of me exactly where. So I know people want to know specifics because warehouse has its work, right? But let's talk about process. So from a process perspective, when we say we scanned the globe, we've literally done that. And so out of literally the hundreds of people who participated in the transformation teams, they've done what we call horizon scans. So I can say that in all of the work we've done, we've looked across in other Caribbean islands in terms of schooling and teaching and learning. We've looked at South America, we've looked at Asia, we've looked at New Zealand and Australia, we've looked at the United States, we've looked at Canada. So across the globe, there are places that do have some form of signature learning program, but keep in mind that through this co-design process, I would hope there isn't a place in the world that is doing what we're doing, because we are co-designing for us. So what we've done is scan the globe for the kinds of signature learning programming or specialist schools, but we have designed signature learning programs for Bermuda. I will highlight High Tech High, which is in California, And I do know that I think they have representatives here years ago through one of the private schools sharing information. And we happen to have looked at High Tech High, well, the name speaks for itself, where they do a lot of stuff in the technology space, and they can be considered a signature learning school. There's another school, don't quote me where it is, but it's right inside of a mall or of the industry that they're in. And so they basically live in the work that they're doing in terms of the specialisms that they have. But certainly, because I don't want to be floppy, email school redesign that person, school redesign at moed.bm, and if you want some specific schools, we will be happy to email some of that information to you.
Thank you, Ms. Burns.
You're welcome.
From the audience,
Yes, Venus. I have a question, I believe it's for you, Ms. Burns. So one, I would like to just congratulate you guys because the fact that you guys mentioned that this new change would be able to nurture and care for the students' passions. I think that's amazing. I think that's something we've been missing in our public school for a while. But my question is, in terms of the actual programs and the strands within those programs, how easy would it be for students to change? So, for instance, let's say a student, they start off, you know what, I want to be an actuary. So they go into finance and then they go into that strand. And then once they're doing it, you're like, this ain't for me, So, and then they switch maybe to something totally different. And they'll say, you know what, my other passion is tourism. So how easy would it be for that student to switch? Because of course, as they grow, passions change, interests change and everything like that.
And you have hit the nail absolutely on the head. That conversation comes up all the time, but you 100% get it that oftentimes people, their passions change or shift, or they rise and fall. So I've always been passionate about these two things, but right now it's this. And so one of the work streams that we do have is around graduation and credentialing. Okay, and so the idea is to not stunt or hold back young people from meeting graduation requirements, but allowing them time to do what you just said, explore those passions and interests. And so the idea would be, are they continually successfully acquiring their credits, right? So am I successful? And if I'm not successful, it happens to the best of us, right? Then how do I improve on that? But if I go from the accountancy track and I say, this is definitely not what I thought it was, I'm not doing this, and they move over to hospitality and tourism, what they would have done was acquire successful credits. But transferring to tourism will not hinder them from graduating on time. Now, there is a conversation depending on when they do make that transfer, where they have completed the whole thing, maybe or maybe not, but that's why we do tertiary education, right? And the other thing that we're looking at very closely is ultimately having what we call micro-credentialing, which is a really big thing now, not just in terms of education, but in other areas, to get micro-credentials. So along the way, you have this demonstration or this evidence of what you have been successful at, and these little smaller things that you might be certified, so to speak, at, but being able to transfer or to switch, we want you to do that. As I've said in previous conversations around this topic, as parents, I think you want them to change when it's free and not when they're halfway through college and they add a couple more years onto your college bill, right? So we want them to make that change and do it for free and know that at least they've been fulfilled and they're excited about that.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. We have a question for possibly the Commissioner or Dr. Simmons. We've been talking about the credentials that students will gain through these programs. But one of the questions that came up was, what about the teachers? How are teachers being trained and prepared for this new education reform? Are they receiving enough training to deliver the curriculum?
Thank you. I'll start with some general comments and then I'll have Miss Learning first, Laurel Burns, talk about the professional learning that is going to take place. As we make the shift and work to offer a world-class educational experience for our children, we recognize that professional learning is going to be extremely critical for our staff. We have communicated to our staff that there will be a need to raise the bar in terms of certifications. We are in discussions around what that looks like. And we talked about the fact that we've shifted to a philosophy where we are co-designing and we're collaborating and determining things together. And as it relates to the certification for our leaders, for our teachers, the determinations around that will take place as we deliberate and discuss together. But there have been intentional efforts underway to ensure that professional learning is offered for our staff. And so I'm going to ask Ms. Burns just to give some information around that and even to share a bit about what's been happening this week in our schools.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, yes, there has been a lot of intentionality, and so we have provided training or access to information really over the last 2 years, initially through our e-newsletter, which is actually for everyone. And then this past year, we've offered up to staff members via the school leaders some modules that we developed for them that the school leaders share with them. And through some of the system professional learning days, we've provided system PD, utilizing members across the education system as well as members of our Learning First team and our change partners to provide system PD. And that has culminated into this week, which everyone is aware of. We did end schooling for the young people last Friday in order to provide some intentional time with our educators across the island. So essentially what has happened is we have an opportunity in terms of the teachers who will be implementing signature schools come September to drill down and do some finalizing and working together, onboarding their colleagues who will be working with them. And then we have the new signature school that we're beginning to work on for next September, as well as your Parish Prime. We did some onboarding and introductions with them over the last 2 weeks, and they're continuing that work in what we call design labs, which is really exciting for the Parish primary schools, because similar to the process for the signature learning programs, they are now in these design labs, designing and co-creating exactly what the features of Parish primary schools will look like for them, and what are the hardcore things that we're going to be doing in terms of Parish primary schools and developing that. So those school teams are doing that along with their actual schools. So while we have some members of either Purvis or Francis Patton who are on their transformation teams, they're now with their whole school and onboarding them and starting to collaborate and co-design. In the meantime, we have the rest of our system who is engaging in professional development with their school leaders, and everyone is looking at what we call pedagogy and teaching and learning, and specifically we call it high impact teaching strategies. And so the really exciting part about that is that every school has these 3 days to really look at the high impact teaching strategies that we are going to work on as a system. There are about 10 of them, and as a school they'll determine which 2 or 3 or 4 that come September, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to implement it in our school. And that's really, really exciting in terms of the work that we've done over the past 2 years in terms of determining what is best for Bermuda, because globally there aren't just 10 high impact teaching strategies, right? But what have we determined would be really, really awesome for our community based on our needs? And so we should start seeing some things in September based on all of this work over these next 3 days systemically that improves teaching and learning throughout all of our schools.
Ms. Burns, can you just share a bit about the immersion sessions for the S1 Signature Learning Program?
Yes. So last week we had what we call immersion sessions. So again, in terms of the transformation teams, obviously you can't have every single teacher that's teaching or will be teaching S1 students. We had cohorts of people who had expressed interest and were a part of that. So what then had to happen, as you heard Dr. Stimmons say, we're in a phase of implementation. So what then had to happen is we had to immerse the teachers we know that will be working with these young people, either as S1 teachers or S1 advisors, but also in the subject and content areas. And so what we did was spend several days with them over the last couple of weeks through what we call immersion. And they got to see and feel all of the work streams. They got a better understanding of, let's say, the graduation and credentialing element. We did work with them around pedagogy. We talked to them about the partnerships and where we're going with partnerships. They had already been working on curriculum, and they continued to do that and bring that together. And so that immersion process really was an onboarding session for all of the teachers who will be working with our S1 students in September. And it was a really, really exciting time. They may have read about the work that we've been doing in the newsletters. They may have heard bits and pieces, but the opportunity to see all of the work streams come together, the work they had done, and also how it would look for them has been really, really exciting. And I think after tomorrow, they'll be ready and raring to go.
Just to expand on that, one of the opportunities, as I would say, although we're very much interested in calibrating the system to make sure that we're all on the same page, moving in the same direction, our principals and teachers are adamant that as we embrace what we call learning principles for adults, that they need to have differentiated learning experience, because it's a developmental process around change management and understanding that. And so Ms. Learning First here to my right will be spending some time downloading some of the cognitive stuff that has happened over the past few days, so that each site can have a differentiated plan to serve the teachers in their communities and where they are in this developmental process, and that's exciting.
If I may add, we have teams also who've done the project-based learning certification.
Yes.
And the significance of that is, we want our children to be able to produce something. And project-based learning is really getting at our children to produce something about what they learn. So we have teachers who have already taken the lead on this here and have been certified. As a matter of fact, some of them are so outstanding in their certification that their models have been used by international presenters as an example of what effective project-based learning could look like and should look like.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? Take you in the back, sir.
I have a comment more than a question. My name is Joe Mahoney. I'm with the Youth Entrepreneurship Initiative of Bermuda, and we have been a part of the Signature School Transformation Program now for about 12 months, beginning here at Bermuda College last June, I believe. And I would like to just reiterate some of the things that have been stated tonight. This is most definitely a ground-up initiative. This is not top-down. I commend the Innovation Unit and their team for the way they've conducted this process, and it is really homegrown. Laurel has mentioned that a couple of times, but I really have been impressed as a community partner participating in these workshops. This is what Bermuda needs, and it's very much Bermuda-centric. Our role as a partner has been to support the entrepreneurship piece. As the minister mentioned, that it is a overall content piece for all of the signatures as opposed to being its own signature. I think that was a brilliant decision. Compliments to the ministry for that. And so our strategy is to infuse entrepreneurship across all of the signatures. It will be done in modules over 3 years. That's 6 different modules, one each semester. And at the end of the 6 modules, the students will have produced enough input to the process that they will have a business plan to present. And to Dr. Simmons' comment, that's an experiential learning opportunity where they will stand and present a business plan that they've created on their own idea based within their signature that they can take away, and they will be credentialed with that. We'll also be offering some more advanced courses in the 4th year, the last year of senior school, for those who really want to focus on entrepreneurship so they can take a more intense dive into entrepreneurship. But suffice to say, every student in the Signature Learning Program will be producing enough material to create a business plan at the end of 3 years.
So we're very proud to be supporting the effort, and I commend the ministry for taking this on, and I compliment Learning First and again, Innovation Unit for the way it's been processed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a question?
Yes, I do have a question. Thank you for this presentation. It was really informative. I think that in listening to and talking about educational reform, this is a really great model. But I do wonder what systems or support you are offering to address the full scope of a child, to meet all their educational needs and kind of lead to equity, which I think is a word that I've heard throughout this conversation, and community. So when I'm thinking about, like, if a kid is going into the veterinary versus accounting track, that's great. But what about food and housing stability? Does this model take any of the factors that also impact the way that a kid is able to show up to school and also perform optimally so that they can achieve their full potential? I understand that we're doing the academic side, but does this system encompass anything to meet the whole child.
Any questions? Who would like to take that?
Thank you. I can start, and then I would like Representative from Learning First just to drill down in terms of what will be offered for children as it relates to the curriculum. As we make the shift to offer what we want for our children, a first-class educational system, we will be incorporating what we call wraparound services for our young people. And so there are plans to ensure that we meet the needs of children. If it means that we have to meet the needs of children as it relates to providing them with meals, then the plan is to incorporate that. The plan is to incorporate, if we have to, supporting parents around the provision of uniforms. If children have needs where they're not meeting the standards, and then there will be interventions to help children to meet those standards. So the plan includes what we call wraparound services for children, but also wraparound services for parents will be offered as well. And so there are plans as well to ensure that we have curricula that will address the social emotional needs of our children. And I'll ask either Ms. Burns or Ms. Smith to share a bit about that.
So I mean, in terms of the social emotional curriculum, and you heard me talk about business as usual, there's definitely some foundations in our system that currently exist that tap into that. We recognize that it's no longer meeting the entire needs based on where our community, some of our community challenges are lying. So therefore, how do we begin to think about that same process of elevating what's existing to meet the needs of the current landscape? Because I think this development of those social emotional curricula would have been decades ago. And they normally just set for a small population like our learning support students. But I think what we're recognizing, as you say, how are we getting ready for you coming to our doors and embracing not just the curriculum and the education experiences, but that whole child through the wraparound services, extending home to school, whether that be through supports, counseling, that personal advisory advocate, to help me plot my course to meet my full potential. So those are things that are being developed in some of the tracks for school choice advisory. And there's actually a new job description, I'm pretty sure that's coming, that speaks to a personal
Learning
advocate. And that role is going to be a powerful role, and it's going to look a little differently from what we currently have as the counselor who sits down with the child maybe at P5, again at M2, to talk about career planning. It's going to take a whole different shape to understand how do we open up opportunities for young people to blow up this concept of the prison to school pipeline and change that to the pipeline from school to talent pipeline, right? So it's still work in progress, and some of the challenges are because we are co-creating and co-designing, all of the answers aren't always on tap, right? But the ideal is that we see it, we understand it, we just need to look in our community and understand there's a need for it.
I can expand a bit on it as well. I mean, I know you gave as an example maybe food security or home stability, but I think all around you're saying, what about the whole child? So as another example, one of the what we call national and core priorities that we worked on at the very beginning had to do with learning environments. And learning environments is not just the physical environment, but the cultural environment of a school. And when we had the teams work on that, we had they did a lot of research and work around, yes, the physical space, and that physical space makes a big difference in the emotional stability of a child as well, but even the culture and how we manage young people coming into a room who may be having an off day, and how we manage that, and even us from a scheduling perspective, right? So what is a school without a clock or a time or schedules, and how does that impact the child? So all of those things help from that social emotional perspective. Additionally, what has already been in play in our system and it's becoming a part of even the work we're doing because it fits, is the idea around restorative practices as well, which we're delving more into because of those things. Because even with your example around maybe food instability, that does create a certain constitution in a child. They may have certain behavioral issues, and unless we create a culture that gets to the root of that issue and not just say, well, that child is rude or naughty and they need some type of punitive response to that, then we're not going in the direction that we'd like to go. So we are creating not just the services and the people to provide that, but a culture across our system that is inclusive for all. And that is one of those underpinning things in terms of our vision for learning, that when we talk about inclusivity, we mean inclusivity for real.
And just a quick, just to touch on that, I would say that when we're looking at our signature schools, it's that approach of a community-based involvement into our schooling as well, involving the community into the school system, so they provide some of that support. Whilst there is a lot of things that can happen within the school system, there are a lot of things that happen outside of the school system that we do want to lean on the community to help us to address and become the support for their parish school as we move forward. We're also looking at how we can address inequality through simply things like our admissions process and ensuring that our children get the opportunities to fulfill the potential and provide them with a pipeline out of things that may not give them the opportunities to pursue the dreams that they should be pursuing. And so if we can look at that from that perspective on how we can revamp our admissions process to ensure that our children are getting the services they need and pursuing the goals that are right for them, by putting things in place like that. But I do believe when we talk about the parish, and we haven't talked much about the parish primary schools today, but the parish primary school concept really does address some of these things as well by bringing the community in to rally around the school and provide that external village support, as we say.
Minister, I want to sort of direct this next question to you.
Really?
You just mentioned about community buy-in and support. This question leans toward, what if the signature schools don't work? Are there any contingency plans, and is this sustainable? Is this a sustainable long-term plan?
Yes. The simple answer to that is yes. As we've talked about extensively today, you've heard Laurel speak to it, you heard Lisa speak to it. I'm sorry, Ms. Smith. speak to it. This is not something that we have just woke up yesterday and said, this is where we're going. There is extensive research behind this. There's extensive code collaboration and code design behind this feature. This is what Bermuda has determined that Bermuda needs. And so if this fails, which it will not, it is because nobody got it right. And that doesn't include the people you see sitting up here. That includes all of you as well, because it has been critically important for us to reach out to the Bermudian public to ask, what is it that you want? It's been critically important for us to reach out and look across the globe, as Laurel has talked about when we talk about horizon scanning, looking across the globe to say what are best practices. However, we are not looking at taking a system that is operating somewhere else. And I like what Laurel said. You hope that you don't see the system anywhere else because it's built for Bermuda by Bermuda. And that's why we are confident that we will see success in this. And this is why we have seen the success in this and the things that we've put forth as we've moved forward towards complete education reform.
I understand that we do have more questions. We have come to the end of our town hall meeting. I will give each member an opportunity to say some.
Dan, we can take one more from the young men in the audience.
Minister has granted you one more.
Thank you, Minister. It's more of a short comment than a question, just to add to what the young lady said. When I was coming through, I went through a program called Immersion, and that helped to, close some of the gaps where, like, the emotional side and outside stress and stuff I wouldn't be talking about on the job and in school. And that, carried me where the school system couldn't carry me. And then also, as far as the signature school as well as work, I look at Alicia Keys. She went to signature school and she's brilliant. You know what I mean? Singer, dancer, performer.
Thank you for that contribution. And some great. Sorry. Go ahead. Go for it.
Only because the topic has been quite prudent in a lot of discussions with myself and some of my friends that I speak with on a constant basis, and I'm kind of wondering how this program regime, and kudos to everyone here because I think it's very important. I personally think it's going to work very well for Bermuda, but I do want to reiterate and ask what is being done or implemented to actually help with proper and better sex education when it comes to school reform. Are you guys responsible for how that's going to be implemented, or is that someone else's critical decision?
I'm actually going to, I know that was a question that was sent in and was answered by the commissioner just late last week to the commissioner, and I can talk about what we're doing within the Board of Education to look at, well, I'll start. The Board of Education, we're looking at policies that include inclusivity amongst our students, and it's something that is being actively worked on so we can have a policy in place in the short term. But in terms of what's happening in reference to sex education within our school system, I will leave that to the commissioner to expand on.
Thank you, Minister. Sexual health, we have a sexual health modules that are taught in our schools from P1 right up to S4. The curriculum, I believe, is Health Smart, Dr. Simmons, and it is a very comprehensive curriculum. We did receive a media query around what was offered in terms of sex education. We shared about this Health Smart curriculum, and we talked about the specific outcomes as it related to the sexual health. But yes, it is taught in our schools. Yes, it is taught from primary 1 right up to S4. And there are specific modules and specific outcomes for the standards for those modules.
How long has that been in place?
I believe,
Curriculum?
yeah, the Health Smart.
It's on its third year. But of course, with COVID, it's really disrupted even the true delivery of it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna put a pause on that one. What we're gonna do is just have each one of our panelists say last final words in reference to the presentation this evening. I will ask Ms. Laurel at the end of her piece to give the email address. So if you do have additional questions, this will be for the audience here and the people at home. If you have further questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, that you have the exact contact. So let's just start from Commissioner and just go straight down the table. Just closing thoughts, please.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate our commitment to ensuring that our children have a world-class education system. And I wanted to share something about equity, and I'm so glad you raised it. Right now, our resources, our human and financial resources are spread across schools, and they're spread in a way that really does not address equity. And so we're looking to shift to a process that will enable us to determine the financial resources and the human resources based on the needs and the demographics and the profiles of our children to ensure that they get exactly what they need.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Simmons?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of with what we're doing right now, and I often share with teachers and staff that what I like about what is going on in education is a step toward, we talk about changing mindsets, but I often in the office talk about decolonizing mindsets. And when we talk about decolonizing our mindsets, I think a lot of what we're introducing pushes our educators, especially because our children are already asking questions. And so the educators need to be prepared to ask questions and critical questions, and be prepared to answer those questions, and if they can't answer it, be prepared to redirect to those who can answer it. So what we are engaged in right now has us on a path to really about decolonizing mindsets, and it starts with questioning.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. Minister Rabain?
I'll let Laurel and
Let her finalize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really quickly, I did find my example, so I want to share that with our listener. So when we talk about South America, we looked at two places, Peru and Costa Rica, and that was from a system transformation perspective. So there's the Innova schools in Peru that we looked at, and some of the things we considered were around how they did some blending, collaborative, and self-directed learning approaches, as well as they were one of the areas we looked at in terms of flexible learning environments and expert learning resources. And also from a system transformation perspective, we looked at the Costa Rican Ministry of Public Education and how they did new pathways through vocational education and training and relevant assessment and teaching capability. But in terms of specific signature learning programs, we did look at for STEM, the Australian Science and Math School in Australia, And then we also looked at City Polytechnic High School for Engineering, Architecture, and Technology, and that is in the US. It's actually an early college school in Brooklyn that serves grades 9 to 14 as a P-Tech school, and they actually graduate with a high school diploma and an industry-recognized associate degree. So these are the kinds of places that we looked at when we did our horizon scans and we developed briefs for our various schools. I think in terms of a final word, a lot of people knew me. When I first heard the question around what if this doesn't work, and I was like, but how is it not? That's impossible, because this is an all hands on deck initiative and project. I think we're up to hundreds of people who've been a part. This doesn't get to not work. This is going to work. It's non-negotiable. So that was, for me, a question I couldn't even wrap it around my head because of where we are and what we're doing. This will work. It's going to work. We're here, we're doing it. So non-negotiable.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Ms. Smith?
If we think about the student in the center of everything that we do, I truly believe that we'll get it right. Because it sort of makes us have this collective responsibility, because the late Whitney Houston said it best. I'm not going to sing it. You know, the children are our future. Teach them well, and they will lead the way. Right? I'm not going to sing, but it really gets to that collective piece. And no matter where you sit in government, where you sit in the private sector, this is our community. And as Laurel said, it's non-negotiable. We have to get it right.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And Minister Rabain, final words, please.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming out, those that have come out, those that have tuned in. You'll often hear me say that everything starts with a conversation. And what we've done has started with a conversation, and it just expands beyond that. What we've also done is done this in such a way that people feel empowered, people feel valued, and people feel that they are part of the solution. And so one of the most powerful things that I've heard from when I visit the sessions of teachers when they're collaborating is, you know, to hear a teacher say, or to hear an educator, or to hear just a parent say, you know, the idea that I spoke of is actually right up there on the board, and it's being considered. And so that's the type of co-design that we're talking about. So when we say, as Laurel said, when, you know, I was kind of taken back and saying, what if this fails? It won't fail, and I'm confident it won't fail because everybody is putting their input into this. We are not grabbing a system from somewhere else and plopping it in Bermuda to say, let's go. We are saying, we know what works elsewhere, but we know it might not be just right for Bermuda. We have to figure out how to co-design it, how to put it in place so it does work for Bermuda. I've often said that, you know, at the end of this journey that we're on, that won't happen overnight, that will take several years to accomplish, people will look and say, look at what they're doing in Bermuda. Can we emulate that? That's what all of us in this room, that's what all of us in Bermuda will be proud of when we finish with this transformation. I just appreciate everyone that does come out, and we want to hear from all of you, the people who do support, and we want to especially hear from the people who do not support, because those are the people who are going to make this process even better than what it already is. Because you're the ones that are seeing things that we may miss, because we're not looking at it from that critical side. And that's the purpose of having this co-design and co-collaboration. Get everybody in the room so we can figure out how we can move forward. Again, I thank you all for coming out. I appreciate all the work that gets done on the behalf of myself as the minister. I'm not there designing. We have our innovation unit, we have Learning First, we have the Department of Education, the commissioner and her team, the ELT team, our educators within our schools, our principals. Everybody is rowing in the same direction, and everybody is making the sacrifices to do what needs to be done for our children. And as Ms. Smith said, as long as we keep the children at the center of this, they are the sole reason for everything that needs to happen within our schools. Without students, schools don't exist. There's no need for them. There's no need for us. There's no need for educators to be around. That's why we have to continuously focus on the student and make sure that they are getting the best of everything that we have to offer. With that, thank you for coming out. And I'll pass it back to you, Dana, to close us out.
Thank you, Minister. For those of you that did have a few more questions, our slide is actually up now. minister@moc.bm. Please take a note of that. Share it with someone else that may have a question, comment, or concern. We want to send a great thank you to our viewers who are at home, who have tuned in, who have participated. Thank you to our wonderful audience who showed up today and participated, to our fantastic panel, our presenters, Commissioner Richards, Dr. Simmons, the Learning First team, Ms. Learning First herself, Laura Burns, I'm going to keep calling you that, Laura, Ms. Smith, and of course our Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rabain. To our CITV team, thank you, and our technical team, PS, to everyone that's helped to pull together to make this day a success. Thank you, and to all of you, get home safely, and we'll see you at the next town hall meeting. Good night.